Lots of people are afraid to speak English because they're worried about making mistakes and what other people might think about them if they make mistakes. And the first thing that I need to say is that this is normal, and I understand why you feel this way. However, your speaking is never going to improve unless you start speaking more. And even when your speaking does improve, you're still going to make mistakes. That's something that we do when we speak. We make mistakes sometimes. It's completely normal. But again, I understand that for many people this can be very uncomfortable. That's why in this video today, I'm going to give you 5 simple steps that will help you become more comfortable speaking in front of other people and less worried about making mistakes. Step number 1 is to understand that 99% of people don't care about your English. A common fear among English learners is that everyone is paying really close attention to their English. They think that people think bad things about them every time that they use the wrong tense or pronounce a word incorrectly. But the truth is that most people don't even notice your mistakes. And of the people who do notice them, 99% of them don't care because they can still understand what you are trying to say. So remember, most people are only paying attention to your message, not your grammar or your vocabulary. Step number 2 is to use language that you are comfortable with. A lot of language learners like to use big words and complex grammar to try to impress other people. And if you're taking the IELTS exam, that can be helpful. But in real life, again, most people don't care about your English. No one cares how big the words you use are, or how complex your grammar is. Like I said before, most people just want to understand your message. So instead of trying to make your language sound advanced, just use language that you're comfortable with. If you want to improve your English, yes, you definitely should keep trying to learn new words and keep trying to improve your grammar. But if you are someone who isn't comfortable speaking, don't worry about those things while you are speaking, because doing that is only going to make you more uncomfortable. Plus, using simple language with confidence and fluency is a lot more impressive than struggling to use big words that you're clearly only using to try to impress other people. Step 3 is to remember that if someone does try to make you feel bad about your English, they are not someone whose opinion you should care about. Also, you're an adult, so just ignore them or tell them to stop. Step number 4 is to understand that mistakes are opportunities to improve, not something to be afraid of. Again, a lot of the time, no one even notices when you make mistakes. But sometimes you are going to make mistakes that confuse people. And although this might feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes, it's important to make these mistakes because they tell us that there is something that we can improve. And we make mistakes for 2 main reasons. Sometimes it's because we really don't know something. And sometimes it's because we just need to practice more. So when you make a mistake, don't say things like, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid." Instead, just say, "Okay, that's something that I need to learn how to say correctly." And then learn how to say it correctly. Also, the more mistakes you make, the more you will see that 90% of the time, nothing bad happens when you make them. And as a result, you will become less worried about making mistakes and more comfortable speaking. Now, the final step is going to help you with the mistakes that you make when you do know something, but you just need to practice using it more. This step is to practice speaking by yourself. Hearing a word or phrase just one time does not guarantee that you are going to be able to use it easily in a real conversation. To become confident using new words and phrases, you need to use them again and again. And the easiest way to practice using a word or phrase again and again is to practice using it by yourself. This way, when you need to use it in a real conversation, it won't be your first time using it, so you'll be less nervous and able to use it much more easily. I'm Teacher Mike, and today I'm giving you 10 things that you should be doing if you want to improve your vocabulary. And although I am an English teacher, these are tips that you can use when learning any language. They are not just for learning English. Number 1 is to read, especially things that have lots of words that you have never seen before. Lots of people say things like, "I've tried reading before, but there were lots of words that I didn't know." Yes, that's the point. You are reading because you want to find words that you don't know. That is how you learn new words. If you already know all of the words, you aren't learning anything. And obviously, when you find new words and you can't figure out what they mean, look them up in a dictionary. Number 2 is to listen. And when I say listen, this includes watching TV shows, watching movies, watching videos on YouTube, etc. And just like with reading, your goal here is to find words that you don't understand or have never heard before. I usually recommend watching things with the captions turned off so that you can focus on improving your listening. However, when your goal is to improve your vocabulary, you might want to have the captions turned on so that you can see how new words are spelled. Number 3 is to speak every day, even if you are just speaking to yourself. In the morning, speak to yourself about everything that you are going to do that day. And during the day, speak to yourself about the things that you are currently doing and the things that you have already done. And here, again, the goal is just to find words that you don't know. However, instead of hearing or seeing a new word, when you're doing this, you're just going to notice that you don't know a word. For example, maybe you're at the supermarket and you're saying to yourself, "I need to buy," and then you realize that you don't know the word for the thing that you need to buy. That's an opportunity to learn a new word. And you can look the word up right then, or you can look it up later. Up to you. You probably have a smartphone, so just search. What do you call the yellow stuff that people put on hamburgers? You can also just use Google Translate or something like that. Although it's always better to try to use the language that you are learning and avoid translating things into your first language, occasionally translating a few basic words really isn't a big problem. Number 4 is very similar to number 3. However, instead of talking to yourself about what you're doing, you're just going to look around and see what things you can name and what things you can't name. And again, your goal is to find things that you can't name. For example, if you're in an office, it might go like this. That's a chair. That's a bookshelf. That's a window. That's... I don't know what that is. Then you just search. What do you call the thing that creates holes in pieces of paper? And now you've learned the word 3-hole punch. And with this one, you could also set a goal, such as, I'm going to learn one new word each place that I go today. Number 5 is to write. Writing is important because it's an easy way to make sure that you are using and not forgetting the language that you already know. However, just like talking to yourself, it's also a really easy way to discover which words you don't know. I especially recommend writing about things that you did earlier in the day or things that you're going to do later in the day, because this will help you learn the vocabulary that you need to talk about your daily life. But honestly, you can write about anything that you want. It's up to you. And when you're writing to improve your vocabulary, don't worry about your grammar being perfect. That's not the goal here. Your goal is just to discover which words you don't yet know, so that you can look them up and learn them. Number 6 is to always write down new words. Hearing or seeing a word one time does not guarantee that you will be able to remember it in the future. So when you see or hear a new word, make sure to write it down, either in your phone or in a notebook. And when you do this every day, you will have a big list of words that you can continue learning more about and practice using. And even if you forget to come back and review your list of words, just writing the word that one time is going to help you remember it more easily than if you hadn't written it. And this leads us to number 7. Every time you learn a new word, search for it on the internet, find some example sentences with it, and write those sentences down. And you can also try writing some of your own sentences with it. This is important because seeing or hearing a word in only one sentence does not guarantee that you fully understand what it means or when it's appropriate to use it. To really understand a word, you need to see or hear it used many times in many different situations. But when you first hear or see a new word, you might not always have time to do this. And that's why it's important to always write new words down immediately in your phone or notebook. That way, when you have time, you can just check your list to see which words you still have to do this for. This is also important because if you want to be able to remember and use new words in the future, you need to review them. And when you have 5 sentences for each word that you have learned, you can read those sentences out loud to review the word to make sure that you don't forget it, and also to practice speaking. Number 8 is to make flashcards for each new word that you learn. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining how to use flashcards because you probably already know how to use them, and if you don't, you can just watch my video about how to use them after you finish watching this one. But I do want to say that the reason that flashcards are so important is that they are a really simple way to review the words that you have learned recently. And reviewing the words that you have learned recently is something that you absolutely need to be doing, especially if you think that you might not have many opportunities to use those words in conversation. Also, it's up to you whether you want to use real paper flashcards or you want to use a flashcard app. They work basically the same way. Number 9 is to set a goal for how many words you are going to learn each day. If you have a lot of time and you are very serious about studying, you should probably aim to learn about 15 to 20 words each day. However, if you don't have much time or you're not very serious about studying, you could aim to learn just 3 to 5 new words each day. The important part is really just to have a specific goal, because if you have a goal, you're more likely to stay motivated and actually do the things that I mentioned in numbers 1 through 8. And finally, number 10. This one is to be open-minded and learn about all topics, even if they are things that you don't like or aren't interested in. This is because if you want to be able to communicate with lots of different people in lots of different situations, you need to be able to talk about lots of different things, not just the things that you like. So those are my 10 tips for improving your vocabulary, but if you have other tips, please make sure to share them in the comments. Do you ever feel like your English just isn't improving? That might be because you don't have good short-term goals. And I want to be very clear. If you are just learning English for fun, you don't need to have short-term goals. You'll probably improve a lot faster if you do, but it's not necessary. However, if you feel like your English isn't improving and you find it difficult to stay motivated, having good short-term goals is really important. I'm Teacher Mike. I help adults like you learn real English that they can use in their daily lives. In this video, I'm going to quickly explain how you can use short-term goals to stay motivated when learning English. So, one thing that I have noticed is that very few people set short-term goals when learning English. Often, the only goals that people have are big long-term goals, like, I want to speak just like a native speaker. I want to have perfect grammar. Or I want to lose my accent. And the people who only have these big long-term goals are also often the same people who are always complaining that they aren't improving or don't feel motivated. It's really important to understand that when learning a language, we don't improve a lot in just 1 week or just 1 month. Improving a lot takes months or sometimes years, depending what your goals are. So if you only have big, long-term goals that might take several years to achieve, sometimes you're going to study for 1 or 2 years, and you're going to improve a lot, but you're not going to achieve any of your goals. When this happens, many people wrongly believe that they are not improving, and they become disappointed. And this is one of the main reasons why short-term goals are so important. Short-term goals are daily reminders that you are improving, even though you haven't yet achieved a long-term goal. You can't move up a whole level in just 1 day. However, you can learn 10 words in 1 day, and that's really good. That's something that you should be proud of. For someone who doesn't have short-term goals, 10 words is just 10 words, and it might feel like very little. But when you have promised yourself that you are going to learn 10 new words each day, each 10 words is you doing what you said you would do and achieving a small goal. Again, it's a reason to feel proud and positive. Each 10 words is also 1 step closer to something much bigger. By the end of the year, those 10 words each day will add up to 3,650 words, and knowing this can help to keep you motivated. So, how do we choose short-term goals? A good short-term goal is one that you know you can achieve, one that you can measure easily, and one that forces you to be consistent. By consistent, I mean that you do it every day, or almost every day, without ever skipping days. One example of a good short-term goal is, I'm going to read out loud, 20 minutes per day, 5 days per week. That's something that anyone can do. You can measure it easily, and it forces you to be consistent. Even if you have a very busy day, you should always be able to find 20 minutes to practice reading out loud. Other good ones are, I'm going to learn 5 new words 7 days per week. Or, I'm going to review my flashcards for 15 minutes every morning. These two are good for the same reasons. They're easy to do, they're easy to measure, and they force you to be consistent. And remember, if one of your long-term goals is to improve your speaking, one of your short-term goals should include speaking practice, not just listening, writing, and reading. So again, achieving these small, short-term goals each week should help to keep you feeling positive and motivated. But what if it doesn't? What if you have been achieving all of your short-term goals for the last 200 days, but you still don't feel like you're improving, or you still don't feel motivated? If that happens, just remind yourself of what you have done in the last 200 days. Remind yourself that by learning 5 new words each day, you have learned 1,000 words that you didn't know before. It doesn't matter how you feel because you have evidence that you are improving. You can't learn 1,000 new words and not improve. That's not possible. Remind yourself that by reviewing your flashcards for 15 minutes every morning, you have spent 50 hours reviewing flashcards. It doesn't matter how you feel because it's impossible to review flashcards for 50 hours and not improve. Also, remember that learning a language is difficult and takes a long time. It's completely normal to feel disappointed sometimes, feel like you're not improving, or even feel like you want to give up. But if you want to avoid those feelings, I highly recommend that you start setting good short-term goals. I'm Teacher Mike, and today I'm giving you my top 10 rules for learning a new language. And I already have videos about how to improve your speaking, how to improve your grammar, how to improve your listening, etc. So today's video is more about the habits and the mindset that I believe you need to have in order to successfully learn a new language. Rule number 1 is be consistent, which basically means study the same amount each week and don't take days off. Don't do 5 days one week and then 1 day the next week. If your goal is 5 days, always do 5 days. Also, the easiest way to stay consistent is to make studying a part of your daily routine by always studying in the same place and at the same time. And I recommend studying at least 5 days per week, even if it's only 15 to 30 minutes each day. This is because when you're learning a new language, it's difficult to start feeling comfortable with the language when you have periods of 2 or 3 whole days in which you are not using it. Having long periods of time in which you do not use the language also makes it more difficult to remember the things that you have just learned. And this leads us to rule number 2, which is to spend about 25% of your study time reviewing the things that you learned earlier in the week or earlier in the month. Hearing a word one time or reading the definition of a word one time does not mean that you really understand that word, and it definitely does not mean that you are going to be able to use it easily in conversation. To really understand a word and be able to use it well, you need to see, hear, and use that word many times in many different situations. When you see or hear a new word and you want to be able to remember it and use it in the future, you need to write it down. And after you write it down, I then recommend writing 3 to 10 sentences with it and creating a flashcard for it. You should probably be learning at least 5 new words each day, and this means that each day you will have about 5 new flashcards and at least 10 new sentences. For about 2 weeks, review those sentences and those flashcards for about 10 to 45 minutes each day. When you feel like you know one of the words really well, you can stop reviewing that one and focus more on the other ones. However, every couple weeks, you should also go back and review the old flashcards and old sentences that you haven't reviewed recently. This part is really important because even if you felt like you knew the words really well after reviewing them every day for 2 or 3 weeks, you still need to come back and review them occasionally if you want to be able to remember them long term. Also, go back and watch old videos that you've already watched before, even if you felt like you already understood them 100% the first time that you watched them. You might understand everything the first time that you watch a video, but you're almost never going to remember everything the first time. And even if you do remember everything, the second time you watch it, you might just notice something new or interesting that you didn't notice the first time. This is also just a really good way to check how much your listening has improved since the last time you watched the video. Number 3 is be patient. Learning a language can take a very long time. Unless you are studying, listening, and practicing speaking for several hours each day, you're probably not going to be fluent in just 1 year. And even if you do become fluent in just 1 or 2 years, you're still going to spend the rest of your life learning new words. If you want to learn a language fast, you can. But if you don't have the time, energy, or motivation to do the things that are necessary in order to learn a language fast, you need to accept the fact that you're probably going to be learning for the next 2 to 20 years. Number 4 is listen to the language every day. Teacher, I don't understand native speakers in conversation. Yeah, that's because you never practiced listening to native speakers in conversation. The more you do something, the easier it gets. And when you're listening, you don't need to understand everything that you hear. You're mostly listening to become familiar with how the language sounds and to hear words pronounced correctly again and again, even if you don't understand what they mean. That way, when you learn new words in the future, you already know how they should sound because you've already heard them pronounced correctly a million times before. So every day, listen to native speakers for as much time as you can. And before we go to number 5, if you are finding this video useful, please don't forget to hit the like button. Doing this really helps my channel, and it also helps other learners like you because it tells them that this is a good video to watch. 5. Make lots of mistakes, but try to never make the same mistake twice. It is important to make mistakes when you are learning. Every time you make a mistake, you learn that something is wrong, and that is an opportunity to learn what is right. You actually need to make mistakes in order to learn what you know and what you don't know, what you're good at and what you're bad at, and what is correct and what is incorrect. However, every time you make a mistake, your goal should be to never make that same mistake again. When you learn that something is wrong, do your best to learn why it's wrong and how to make it right. And if it's a mistake that you think you might make again in the future, write down the correct way to say it and review. And number 6 is don't waste time caring about what other people think about your English if they aren't trying to help you. So many people are afraid of speaking in front of other people because they're worried that someone is going to laugh at them or say something mean to them. The truth is that 99% of people don't care how good or bad your English is. And if a friend, family member, or coworker tries to make you feel bad about your English, tell them to stop. Or if it's someone who you don't know, just ignore them. They're clearly not a good person, and there's no reason to waste your time caring about what they think. Number 7 is don't compare yourself to other people. Sometimes comparing yourself to other people can be okay. But here's the problem. So many language learners compare themselves to people who have worked a lot harder than they have, or have had a lot more opportunities than they have had. People say things like, "My friend speaks English so well, I want to speak just like her. It's not fair. You know what? It is fair. She has worked harder than you. She has spent more time studying than you have. She has spent money on English classes. She has probably done a lot of things that you haven't done. So instead of saying it's not fair, just ask your friend what she has done and then go do the same things. But if you don't have the time, money, or motivation to do those same things, then stop comparing yourself to that person. Number 8 is learn from everything and everyone. Many of the people who follow me on Facebook have told me that I am the only English teacher that they follow. It's nice to hear that. I mean, I appreciate that, but it's sad to think that they are only learning from one teacher when there are hundreds of teachers out there who are talking about different topics and teaching with different teaching styles. When there are so many free resources available, it doesn't make sense to limit yourself to just one. And sometimes I make videos about topics like dogs, cooking, alcohol, holidays, and people say things like, "This topic doesn't interest me." Learning new vocabulary doesn't interest you? That's weird because just yesterday you were asking me how to improve your vocabulary. You can't just learn about things that you like or things that you already know a lot about, because in life you're going to need to talk about everything, not just the things that you like. You don't drink alcohol? That's great, but it doesn't matter. You can still use a video about alcohol to improve your grammar, vocabulary, listening, and pronunciation. Plus, even if you don't drink alcohol, at some point in your life, you're probably going to be around alcohol or talking to someone who does drink alcohol, and that vocabulary will be useful. And number 10 is don't just study, practice. When I make these videos, I often use the word study, but what I really mean when I say study is use the language. Reading a grammar textbook is one way of using the language, and it can be a good thing to do sometimes. But if that's the only thing that you ever do, you're never going to be able to speak or listen well. If you want to get good at speaking, you need to practice speaking. Today we're talking about 10 things that you can do to improve your pronunciation. 1. Listen to the language every day. Listening to the language every day is really important for a lot of different reasons. However, it's especially important when learning English. In many languages, you can see a new word for the first time, and if you know how to read, you will know how to pronounce that word correctly. But English words are often not pronounced the way that they are spelled. With English, the only way to really know how to pronounce a word correctly is to look it up in a dictionary or hear someone say it. If you listen to English every day, you will hear the same words again and again, and over time, you will remember how they sound, and you won't need to look them up or ask someone to say them for you. 2. When you listen, repeat the things that you hear. And try to copy everything, not just the sounds, but also the speed, volume, and emotion. Copying the speed, volume, and emotion is important for 2 reasons. First, this will help you pronounce things more naturally and sound like a real person. Second, it will make the experience feel more real, interesting, and fun, and this will make it easier for you to remember the language. 3. Record yourself speaking so that you can listen to your own pronunciation. Most people never listen to themselves speaking, so often they don't notice that they are pronouncing things incorrectly. They know how the word should sound, but because they have never heard themselves saying it, they don't realize that that is not how they are saying it. So spend a few minutes recording yourself speaking each day, and when you're done recording, listen to it to see if there's anything that you can improve. 4. Record videos of yourself speaking. Just like how people often think that they are pronouncing words correctly when they are not, people also often think that they are moving their tongue, lips, and mouth correctly when they are not. Watching videos of yourself speaking is a great way to see what you are really doing with your mouth. Obviously, you first need to learn how to make the different sounds. You can do this by watching native speakers' mouths while they are speaking, or you can watch videos designed to teach pronunciation. After you know how you should be moving your mouth, record a video of yourself speaking and watch it to see whether that is what you are doing or if you are doing something different. 5. Make videos of yourself speaking and send them to other people. For example, send clips of yourself speaking to your friends instead of sending them text messages. Or start a YouTube channel. Because you are speaking to an audience, you will get feedback from other people. If someone doesn't understand a word that you said, they will probably tell you. And then you can use all of the other methods mentioned in this video to focus on improving your pronunciation of that word. Number 6 is one of my personal favorites, but before we go to number 6, if you are finding this video useful, please don't forget to give it a like. Doing this both really helps my channel, and it helps other learners like you because it tells them that this is a useful video to watch. 6. Use voice to text instead of typing with your fingers. If your phone doesn't understand what you are saying, you're probably saying it incorrectly. Try adjusting your pronunciation in different ways until your phone understands you. When it understands you, you are probably saying it correctly. 7. Learn the International Phonetic Alphabet and use dictionaries to learn how to pronounce new or difficult words. The International Phonetic Alphabet is a special alphabet that was designed to show you how words are really pronounced. If you want to take the time to learn the International Phonetic Alphabet, I highly recommend doing this because it is used in almost all dictionaries. However, it's not necessary to learn this if you don't want to, because nowadays most online dictionaries also give you an audio recording that you can listen to. The main thing I want you to understand is that if you have the internet, you have access to the correct pronunciation of every English word. And if you know the International Phonetic Alphabet, this just makes everything a lot easier. 8. If there are words or phrases that you know how to pronounce, but you still sometimes have difficulty pronouncing them correctly in conversation, make flashcards. People often think that flashcards are only good for memorizing vocabulary. However, they are also a great tool for improving your pronunciation. Write the English word or sentence on one side of the card, and write the translation in your first language on the other side of the card. Then, review your flashcards every day. First, look at the English side and see if you can remember what it means. If you can't remember what it means, check the translation on the back. Then, try to say the English word or sentence clearly and correctly. If you feel like your pronunciation isn't good enough, say it again, focusing on improving the part that you felt wasn't good enough the first time. And don't just do this one time. Do this again and again until you feel confident saying that word or sentence. And I recommend doing this for at least 5 to 15 minutes each day and always doing it at the same time each day. Keep your flashcards next to your bed or on your desk at work so that you always see them at the same time. Make it a part of your daily routine and never forget to do it. 9. Slow down. A lot of people think that speaking English quickly makes their English sound better. It doesn't. It usually just makes it more difficult for other people to understand you. But more importantly, when you slow down, this allows you to speak more carefully and really focus on your pronunciation. 10. Don't only listen to language teachers. Listening to language teachers is good, but language teachers on social media are presenting information to an audience, not having a real conversation with you. So if you want your speech to sound a bit more natural and conversational, you need to spend time not only listening to language teachers, but also listening to native speakers, having conversations with other native speakers. So yeah, those are my 10 tips for improving your pronunciation. And if there are other methods that you like and I didn't mention in this video, please feel free to share them with everyone in the comments. I'm Teacher Mike, and today I'm going to explain why I want you to spend less time watching videos created by English teachers and more time watching TV. So, when I say TV, what I really mean is anything where people are using English to communicate in real situations. Although I do highly recommend TV, you can also watch movies, YouTube channels about topics that interest you, or podcasts about topics that interest you. The idea is that you should be watching things where people are using English, not teaching English. Doing this is one of the best ways to improve your listening, learn new words related to your interests, and learn what native speakers say in real situations. And I already know that half of the comments are going to say things like, "But TV is too difficult because native speakers speak too fast." So let's start with that. You need to understand that when you are learning a language, you're not going to understand everything. That is normal. If you understood everything all the time, there wouldn't be anything to learn. So when you're watching TV, or you're watching a YouTube channel about a topic that interests you, understanding everything 100% should not be your goal. What you should be doing is just relaxing and listening. Don't focus too much on trying to understand every word and every sentence. Just relax and listen. Also, because you can see what's happening on the screen, you will usually be able to understand what people are talking about, even if you don't understand all of the language. And if you do this every day for at least 30 minutes, you will notice that your listening skills will begin to improve very quickly. Plus, when you listen like this, your brain and your ears are becoming familiar with how real English sounds. So even if you only understand 20 to 30% of what people are saying, it's still really useful. When you learn new words and phrases in the future, you will often already know how they should sound, because you have heard them many times before, even though at that time you didn't fully understand them. So it's really important to understand that listening is really useful, even when you don't understand a lot of what people are saying. For example, maybe when watching TV, you often hear the word society. Even if you don't know what the word society means, when you hear it enough times, your brain will remember how it should sound. Then, When you learn the meaning and the spelling of that word in the future, you won't have to spend lots of time learning how to pronounce it because you've already heard it many times before. You just didn't know what it meant. In fact, you might be able to pronounce it more naturally than someone who learned it in the classroom with a teacher. So that's the first thing. You're not always going to understand everything. Sometimes you're not going to understand anything, and that's fine. Now I want to talk about why I think TV shows are so important. When you watch things like news programs, YouTube channels about topics that interest you, documentaries, etc., you are probably improving your listening skills and learning lots of new vocabulary, and that's good. However, when you watch those things, you are hearing how people speak when they are on camera, presenting information about a topic to an audience. But when you watch TV shows or movies, you hear how people speak in real life, and this is really important. One of the main reasons that it can be a lot easier to learn English when you live in an English-speaking country is that every day you hear different people say different things in different situations, and you hear them say these things the way that they actually say them in real life. But luckily for you, you don't have to go to a different country. All you have to do is just watch TV. And yes, you can also learn a lot of this language with videos created by English teachers. In fact, recently, I've seen a lot of really good videos in which teachers act and pretend to be different people in different situations to show learners what we say in those situations. However, to really understand a word or phrase, you need to hear it used many times in different situations by different types of people. So a 15-second video by an English teacher can teach you that sometimes we say "my bad" instead of "sorry." But it will not give you a good idea of who uses this language and who doesn't, or who they use it with and who they don't use it with. But when you watch TV shows or other content created for native English speakers, you will hear different people use "my bad" in many different situations. And over time, you will get a pretty good idea of who uses this, who doesn't use it, what situations they use it in, what situations they don't use it in, and how it makes other people feel when they use it. And this is why I really recommend watching TV. If you are on season 3 or season 4 of a series, you know all of the characters really well. So when you hear them say things, you know not only this is what to say in this situation, but this is what this type of person would say in this situation, and this is how it made the other people feel. Basically, if you want to communicate well, you can't just learn words and phrases. You do need to learn them, but you also need to learn who uses them, who doesn't use them, when they use them, when they don't use them, and how other people feel when they use them. And hearing a word or phrase used 50 different times by different people in different situations, even if you don't understand it 100%, is usually still more useful than an explanation from an English teacher. And I truly believe that watching TV is one of the best ways to hear the language used again and again in different situations by different people. But this is just my opinion based on my 12 years of experience as a language teacher, so I would love to hear some of your opinions as well. Should you study grammar when learning English? Learning to use correct grammar is important if you want to speak English well. However, you don't need to memorize lots of rules or study grammar textbooks in order to do this. Today, I'm going to help you understand what you should be doing if you want to improve your grammar. First of all, what is grammar? Grammar is basically just a system, or the rules that we use to create sentences that other people can understand easily. I already have a video in which I talk about that in a lot more detail and also answer the question, is grammar important? So if you haven't seen that video yet, you might want to watch that one before you continue watching this one. But you're probably watching this video because you already know what grammar is, you think it's important, and you want to know how to improve yours. So, should you study grammar? I do not believe that all adults need to study grammar, but I do believe that most adults should study grammar. Basically, many people will find it useful to study grammar, but it's definitely not necessary. Learning to use correct grammar is important if you want to speak English well. However, you don't need to memorize lots of rules or study grammar textbooks in order to do this. Again, I do think that most adults should spend some time studying grammar directly by doing things like memorizing rules and studying grammar textbooks. This is because although you don't need to know why we say things the way that we do, knowing why is usually better than not knowing why. So if you have time to spend learning grammar rules and you enjoy doing it, then yeah, you should do it. However, this is not the main way that I recommend learning grammar. Think about it. You probably spent years learning grammar this way in school and still find it very difficult to use correct grammar in conversation. It's good to learn and understand rules, but understanding rules does not guarantee that you will be able to use them in real life. This is why seeing, hearing, and using correct grammar again and again is much more important than learning grammar rules. When you see or hear something interesting, write it down. Try creating some of your own sentences using the same structure, and practice saying those sentences during your daily speaking practice. Maybe you hear someone say, "I will be traveling to Vietnam next month," and you have never heard "I will be traveling" before. Write down that sentence, and then write some of your own sentences. You won't know exactly why you are using that grammar, but from that sentence, it's clear that you can use it to talk about travel plans. So, write a few sentences about travel plans. For example, I will be visiting my mother in a few days. I will be staying at the Sheraton this weekend. I will be traveling to Morocco next month. Write those sentences down, practice saying them during your daily speaking practice, and look for opportunities to use them in your daily life. This way, you will have useful phrases and full sentences that you can use easily in the future without having to stop to think about grammar rules. And because you haven't learned exactly why we use will be verb ing, you might use it incorrectly sometimes. However, learning things this way, and sometimes using them incorrectly, is still usually more useful than focusing on rules. Focusing on rules means that you have to stop to think about rules during conversation, and this makes it difficult to speak fluently. And as you continue using and hearing the language again and again, you will get a better understanding of when it's correct to use it and when it is incorrect to use it. You might not be able to explain why you are using it, but you will begin to notice when it feels right and when it doesn't. Being able to use something correctly 75% of the time, but not knowing why you are using it, is usually a lot better than knowing why people use something, but not being able to use it in real situations. Who would you want on your football team? Someone who has hundreds of hours of experience playing football with their friends, but has never read a book about football? Or someone who has read lots of books about football, but has never actually played the game before? You would probably want the person who has learned from experience, because when we are talking about skills, repetition and practice are usually a lot more important than knowledge. In my opinion, reading, listening, copying the things that you see and hear, and practicing using them regularly in conversation is a lot more useful than studying grammar textbooks and memorizing rules. So if you really want to improve your grammar, here are the two main things that I recommend doing. 1. You need to start reading and listening more. The more you see and hear correct grammar, the easier it will be for you to remember what is correct and what is not. 2. Find ways to practice using the things that you see and hear. You don't get good at speaking by reading or listening. You get good at speaking by practicing speaking. If you want to be able to use the grammar that you have learned in real conversation, you need to practice using it during your daily speaking practice. But again, I do think that most adults should spend some time studying grammar directly. Having knowledge of grammar rules is definitely better than not having it. However, being able to use language in conversation is more important than being able to explain why we use it. And that is why you should spend more time reading, listening, and practicing, and less time memorizing rules.